The disabled son of a billionaire, shy and lonely, made an unexpected request to the Black Maid, who had always cared for him. He asked her to be his mum at the school event. Everyone who heard the request was stunned, but no one was prepared for the incredible and emotional response she gave, something that completely changed the boy's life and left everyone present speechless. Before we continue with this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video, because when you stop doing this, YouTube understands that you don't like this content and stops recommending good stories like this. Oh, and don't forget to comment below where you're watching us from. We love to know that. The millionaire departed early each day, leaving the house to its silence. Only the Black Maid heard the click of the closing gate before ascending to wake the young boy in the wheelchair, the son his father never saw in the morning. Ilara's footsteps were light on the grand staircase, a familiar rhythm in the echoing stillness. Each morning felt the same, the weighty quiet after Mr. Thornton's hurried departure. She reached the boy's room, the door slightly ajar. Sunlight painted stripes across the carpet. Inside, 10-year-old Finn lay still, his small frame swallowed by the large bed. Ilara's heart always gave a little tug at the sight. He was a good child, quiet like the house, his bright eyes often holding a wisdom beyond his years. "Good morning, sleepyhead," she said softly, pushing the door open wider. Finn's eyelids fluttered. A small smile touched his lips as he saw her. "Good morning, Ilara." His voice was a gentle murmur. She moved to the window, drawing the curtains further. "Another beautiful day waiting for you." He watched her, his gaze steady. "Will he be back early tonight?" Ilara paused, her hand on the curtain cord. She knew who he was, always. "I don't know, Finn. He doesn't always say." It was the truth, delivered gently. Mr. Thornton's schedule was an enigma, a whirlwind of business that seemed to deliberately bypass his own home. She turned back to Finn, her smile warm. "But you and I, we have the whole day. What adventures shall we have?" Today, a spark flickered in Finn's eyes. "Maybe we could read more of that pirate story?" "Ahoy, matey!" Ilara chuckled, moving to his bedside. She carefully helped him sit up, arranging the pillows behind his back. His small hands, pale against the white sheets, reached for hers. "Did you hear the gate this morning?" Finn asked, his voice barely a whisper. Ilara nodded. "Yes, just like every morning." The sound was a starting gun for her day, the signal that the house was truly hers and Finn's for a few precious hours, a sanctuary of quiet companionship before the vast emptiness of the mansion settled in again. After breakfast, Ilara wheeled Finn to the sunroom. It was their favorite place, filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the warmth of the morning light. Finn loved to watch the birds in the garden, their freedom a stark contrast to his own immobility, a consequence of an illness that had stolen his ability to walk, but not his spirit. Ilara read to him, her voice animated, bringing to life tales of daring pirates and hidden treasures. Finn listened intently, his imagination soaring beyond the confines of his wheelchair and the silent house. Sometimes he would ask questions, insightful and curious, revealing a sharp mind that absorbed everything around him. Lunch was a quiet affair, just the two of them in the vast dining room. Ilara made sure Finn ate well, her care gentle and unwavering. She had been with the Thorntons since Finn's diagnosis, becoming more than just an employee. She was a constant in the boy's ever-shrinking world. The afternoon passed in a similar rhythm, quiet games, stories, and the comfortable silence that spoke volumes between them. Ilara often found herself watching Finn, a deep affection swelling in her chest. He deserved so much more than the fleeting presence of his father. As dusk began to settle, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn, a familiar tension filled the air. It was the time when Mr. Thornton might return, though often he did not. Finn would become quieter, his gaze fixed on the driveway. Ilara would try to distract him, but she understood. The longing for a father's attention was a constant ache, a silent question that hung heavy in the air. Tonight, however, was different. Just as the last rays of sunlight faded, the sound they both knew so well echoed through the silent house. The click of the closing gate. The millionaire departed early each day, leaving the house to its silence. Only the black maid heard the click of the closing gate before ascending to wake the young boy in the wheelchair, the son his father never saw in the morning. While the maid prepared breakfast, the boy pushed his cereal around without appetite. He spoke little, but when he mentioned the Mother's Day party at school, his voice failed. The kitchen was Ilara's domain. It was here, amidst the warmth of the oven and the scent of coffee, that she found her purpose. This morning, however, the familiar comfort was tainted by a sense of unease. Finn sat at the immense marble table, his wheelchair pulled in close, but his attention was a million miles away. His spoon clinked softly against the bowl, a solitary, melancholy sound. Ilara placed a small plate of toast beside his bowl, her movements smooth and silent. "You're not hungry, are you, little man?" she asked gently, her voice a low murmur that barely disturbed the quiet. Finn looked up at her, his big brown eyes filled with a sadness that seemed to have no place in a child so young. He gave a small, tired shake of his head. Ilara didn't press him. She knew better. Instead, she took her own cup of tea and sat down opposite him. The morning light streamed in through the large bay window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, but it did little to lighten the mood at the table. "Are you worried about something at school?" she asked after a moment of shared silence. Finn's shoulders slumped. He picked up a piece of toast, breaking it into smaller and smaller pieces, his fingers moving with a nervous energy he rarely showed. "Not worried," he mumbled, his gaze fixed on the crumbling bread. "Just thinking." Ilara's heart ached for him. She knew this was a dangerous path for a child like Finn, to be alone with his thoughts in a house so big and empty. She leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "Thinking about what?" He didn't answer right away. He just stared at the toast as if it held all the answers he was looking for. Finally, he looked up, his eyes meeting hers. "Today is the day we practice the song." Ilara furrowed her brow. "What song, sweet boy?" For the party," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The Mother's Day party." A heavy quiet settled over the kitchen. Ilara felt it, a cold weight in her chest. She had forgotten all about the date. Finn's father had certainly not mentioned it. The subject was an unspoken one in this house, a fragile thing no one dared to touch. "Oh," Ilara said simply, her mind racing. What could she say? How could she fix this? Her own mother was 1,000 miles away, and her own relationship with her was a complicated, beautiful thing. For Finn, there was only a void. He started pushing his cereal around again, the spoon scraping against the bottom of the bowl, a more desperate sound this time. "Everyone is talking about it. They have to make a craft for their mom, and a card." His voice was thin and small. "And what about you?" she asked, her tone steady, encouraging. "Ms. Gable said I could make one for you if I wanted," he said, the words a jumble as if he was afraid to say them. "But everyone else is making one for their real mom." The word real hung in the air, a cruel, heavy thing. Ilara reached across the table, her hand resting on his. Her touch was warm and firm. "And what are we?" she asked, her voice soft but direct. "Are we not real, Finn?" He looked at their hands, his small and pale, hers strong and dark. You're Ilara." "Yes, I am," she said, her thumb gently stroking the back of his hand. "And you are my little man. And whether or not I gave birth to you, you are mine to take care of. And you are my boy. Isn't that real enough for you?" His eyes welled up with tears glistening in the light. He bit his lip, trying to hold them back. He swallowed hard, his little body trembling slightly. I just wish he would care." Who, honey? Elara asked, though she already knew. Dad, Finn whispered. The name was a fragile, a thing, a plea. I just wish he would be here for one of these things. Just one. He looked at his hand in hers, and a tear finally escaped, sliding down his cheek. Or that I at least had a mum. Elara squeezed his hand gently. There was nothing she could say to that. No comforting words, no platitude that could fill the empty space in his life. The silence was louder than any words. It was the silence of a house where a man made his fortune and his son ached for a connection. He lowered his head, his face hidden from her. Elara continued to hold his hand, her presence a silent promise. That she would be there for him, no matter what. While the maid prepared breakfast, the boy pushed his cereal around without appetite. He spoke little, but when he mentioned the Mother's Day party at school, his voice failed. With tears in his eyes, the boy asked in a low voice, "Could you be my mother at school?" The maid froze. She knew that request wasn't just about the party, but about the emptiness he carried. The words hung in the air, a fragile plea that cracked the silence of the large kitchen. Finn's question was not a simple one. It was a culmination of every silent morning, every missed bedtime, every conversation about a father who was never there. It was a child's desperate attempt to fill a void that felt as vast as the mansion itself. Elara's mind raced in the split second after the words left his. Lips, 1,000 thoughts collided. The sheer audacity of the idea, the potential reaction of Mr. Thornton, but most of all, the deep, overwhelming love she felt for this boy, who saw her not as an employee in a light blue uniform, but as a person, a safe harbor, a mother. She looked at his face, streaked with tears, his eyes fixed on her with a mixture of hope and fear. It was more than a request for her presence at a school event. It was a plea for legitimacy, for a family that didn't feel broken and hollow. "Oh, sweet boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She squeezed his hand, her thumb stroking the back of his fingers. The weight of his hope was a physical thing, and it was almost too much to bear. Elara felt the cold dread of reality set in. She was a housekeeper, a paid caretaker. Her role was clear, defined by a contract and the unspoken rules of a life she did not belong to. Mr. Thornton paid her to keep his house clean and his son fed, not to step into the role of a parent. To show up at school would be a crossing of a line that could cost her everything, and more than that, it would risk his trust, his fragile heart. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to choose her words with care. "Finn," she began, her voice low and steady, "what you're asking, it means the world to me that you would even think to ask. It means more than you could ever know." He didn't say anything, just looked at her, his eyes wide and unblinking. "But Finn," she continued, the words a bitter taste in her mouth, "I can't. Your father." She trailed off, unable to put into words the complex hierarchy and unspoken boundaries of this place. He pulled his hand from hers, the hope in his eyes flickering and dying. He looked away, down at his lap, the silence, returning, this time more painful than before. "It's okay," he said, the two words a punch to her gut. He said them not as a boy accepting a difficult truth, but as a child who had long ago become accustomed to disappointment. "It's not okay," Elara said, her voice firm. She reached out and gently turned his face back to hers. "Finn, listen to me. Being a mother isn't about showing up to a party with a card and a song. It's about being there, every morning, every night. It's about listening when you have something to say, even when you're not sure how to say it. It's about making sure you're fed and safe and loved. And I do all of those things. Doesn't that count for anything?" His lip trembled. He wanted to believe her. He wanted her words to be enough. But the small, sad part of him knew they couldn't be. "But all the other kids will have their real moms," he said, the word real, again like a knife. "And you have a real friend," Elara countered, her voice soft. "A real person who loves you and would do anything for you. And that's something to be proud of. We will have our own Mother's Day. Right here." She gestured around the quiet kitchen. "We can make the craft together. Just the two of us. We can celebrate however you want." He was silent for a long moment, the disappointment a palpable thing between them. Then he slowly nodded, a small, defeated movement. "Okay." The response felt like a failure, a surrender to the emptiness he felt. But what else could she do? She couldn't give him what he truly wanted, what he truly needed. A family, a mother, a father who was present. She could only give him herself, her care, and her time, and hope that it was enough to sustain him. Elara felt the weight of his small grief. She knew that even if he didn't say it, he was hurt. The impossible request had been made and just as impossibly denied. The truth of their reality was a harsh thing. With tears in his eyes, the boy asked in a low voice, "Could you be my mother at school?" The maid froze. She knew that request wasn't just about the party, but about the emptiness he carried. In the late afternoon, the boy insisted before his father. The millionaire knelt beside the wheelchair, surprised to hear the request again. His usually cold gaze filled with a mixture of pain and helplessness. The sound of the front door opening was a rare event at this hour, a disruption to the tranquil hush of the house. Finn, positioned in the grand foyer, stiffened at the sight of his father. Mr. Thornton stood silhouetted in the doorway, a briefcase in one hand, his elegant blue suit a testament to a world far removed from the silent home he had just entered. His face, a mask of professional composure, held a distant exhaustion. Elara, who had been pushing Finn's wheelchair towards the sunroom, instinctively paused. She stepped back, a silent observer in the periphery. A knot of anxiety tightened in her stomach. She knew Finn's intentions. The boy had been quiet, but determined all afternoon. This was the moment he had been waiting for, and she felt a powerful mix of fear for him and pride. Mr. Thornton's eyes, a sharp and assessing blue, swept over the scene. "Finn," he said, the name a formal greeting. "Why aren't you in your room?" Finn, usually hesitant and quiet in his father's presence, did not flinch. His small chin was set with a resolve Elara had never seen before. "I waited for you." Mr. Thornton raised an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his gaze. He walked forward, his footsteps echoing on the marble floor. "Is something wrong?" His tone was a cool, controlled query, as though expecting a report from a subordinate. "No," Finn said, his voice steady, "but I have a question." The millionaire set his briefcase on a side table, a gesture of impatience. "Can't it wait until dinner?" he asked, already unbuttoning his suit jacket. "No," Finn said again, his voice cracking slightly. He looked at his father, a plea in his eyes. "It's important." Something in the boy's tone must have caught Mr. Thornton's attention. He paused, his hands still on his jacket. He looked from Finn to Elara, who stood respectfully a few feet away, her face unreadable. He seemed to be weighing the urgency of his son's plea against the exhaustion of his day. For the first time, he chose the former. "All right, then," he said, a sigh escaping his lips. "What is it?" Finn took a deep breath. "The Mother's Day party at school is tomorrow." The words seemed to deflate Mr. Thornton. He looked away for a moment, the muscles in his jaw working. The topic of the boy's mother was a forbidden thing, a source of unspoken pain that was buried beneath layers of wealth and work. "I'm busy tomorrow, son. You know that." "It's not for you," Finn said, his voice quiet but firm. "It's for Elara." Mr. Thornton's gaze snapped back to his son, then to Elara, a cold, hard confusion settling in his eyes. "What are you talking about?" "I asked her to go with me," Finn continued, his voice picking up a little speed, as if he knew he had to get the words out before his father could interrupt. "She said she couldn't, and I told her that she was my mother, the real one. Because she's the one who is here." The statement was so direct, so painfully honest, that it seemed to reverberate through the grand foyer. Mr. Thornton's composure shattered. He had expected a complaint about a toy or a request for a trip. He had not expected this. The millionaire, a man of immense power who never knelt for anyone, slowly lowered himself. He went down on one knee on the cold marble floor, his elegant suit wrinkling. He was no longer a CEO, a titan of industry. He was just a father looking at his son. In the late afternoon, the boy insisted before his father. The millionaire knelt beside the wheelchair, surprised to hear the request again, his usually cold gaze filled with a mixture of pain and helplessness. Even though she was hesitant, the maid accepted. She styled her hair simply and elegantly, put on a discreet perfume, and set aside a modest dress. The boy smiled like he hadn't in months. The permission came with a condition. Mr. Thornton had stood, his face still a complex mix of shock and discomfort, and told Ilara, "You will go, but you will stay in the background. My son's health is your priority." It was a cold, formal decree, a last-ditch effort to keep a boundary in place that Finn had already erased. The words were a dismissal, a reminder of her place, but Ilara only heard one thing: "You will go." That night, alone in her small, impeccable room on the top floor of the mansion, Ilara felt the weight of the decision. She sat on the edge of her bed, looking at her uniform folded neatly on a chair. This wasn't her world, not really. This family's pain was not hers to carry. Her own life was separate, private and simple. To step into the limelight, even for a moment, felt like a betrayal of that simplicity. It felt like playing a part she was not meant to play. But then she closed her eyes and saw Finn's face, the hopeful, tearful eyes that had looked up at her, waiting for an answer. She remembered his small, trembling body, the quiet bravery it had taken to speak to his father. He wasn't asking her to be a stand-in. He was asking her to be herself, for him, in front of the world. He was saying, "You are enough." A deep, quiet resolve settled within her. The hesitation didn't vanish, but it was replaced by something stronger, a love that was fierce and protective. She was going. She would do it for him. The next morning was different. Ilara's movements in the kitchen were still precise, but they held a new purpose. After she had finished her chores, she went to her room. The first thing she did was take off her uniform. The light blue cotton felt heavy on her shoulders, a symbol of a role that was both confining and safe. She went to her closet, a narrow space filled with practical clothes. She found a simple, knee-length dress in a deep navy. Blue, a color that would not draw attention. It was the dress she wore to church on Sundays, a modest garment that made her feel put together and dignified. It felt like the right choice for the day. She stood in front of the small mirror, looking at her reflection. Her hair, usually tucked away, under a practical band, was left loose. She brushed it out carefully, her short curls springing to life, framing her face in a soft halo. She didn't own a lot of makeup, but she had a small bottle of perfume, a gift from her own mother years ago. The scent was a light floral, clean and subtle. She put a single spritz on her wrists, a gesture that felt both sacred and defiant. Downstairs, Finn waited in the wheelchair by the front door, his small body buzzing with an energy Ilara had not seen in a long time. When he heard her coming down the stairs, he turned. He didn't see the maid in the blue uniform. He saw Ilara, dressed in a way she never was in this house, her face soft and open, her hair free. She didn't have her yellow gloves on. She had her hands in her lap. His eyes widened, and a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face, lighting up his features. It was not the small, polite smile he had given her in the past. This was a full, unrestrained smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. It was the smile of a child who had just received the most incredible gift. It was the smile he hadn't had in months. Even though she was hesitant, the maid Accepted. She styled her hair simply and elegantly, put on a discreet perfume, and set aside a modest dress. The boy smiled like he hadn't in months. On the day of the party, the auditorium was full of mothers and sons. The boy entered in his wheelchair beside the maid. The curious stares did not stop him from proudly introducing her. "This is my mother of the heart." The air in the school auditorium was thick with the scent of cheap perfume, paper crafts, and 100 different lunches. The room buzzed with the frantic, happy chatter of children and the low, constant hum of adult conversation. Ilara had never been in a place that felt so loud and so full. It was a complete sensory overload after the quiet, cavernous rooms of the Thornton mansion. She felt the curious glances the moment they entered. A black woman in a simple navy blue dress, guiding a young white boy in an expensive wheelchair. The picture was an unusual one, and the stares were a physical thing. Little pinpricks of speculation on her skin. She held onto the handles of Finn's wheelchair a little tighter. Finn, however, seemed to float above it all. He was smiling, a wide, genuine smile that lit up his entire face. His head was on a swivel, taking in all the colourful decorations, the banners, the hand-drawn cards taped to the walls. He was a small island of pure joy in a sea of unknown faces. "Look, Ilara," he said, his voice a happy shout. "There's my drawing, the one of the bird." She leaned in, following his gaze to a bulletin board covered in crayon pictures. "I see it," she said, her voice soft. "It's beautiful, honey." As they moved deeper into the auditorium, Finn's enthusiasm only grew. They were looking for an empty spot in the rows of seats. As they passed a group of mothers, one of Finn's classmates, a small boy with freckles, saw them and came bounding over. "Hey, Finn!" the boy said, his eyes bright with excitement. "Who's that?" Finn's smile didn't falter. He turned his head to look at Ilara, a look of unshakable confidence in his eyes. He didn't hesitate. He didn't flinch. He just pushed his small chest out, his voice clear and strong in the noisy auditorium. On the day of the party, the auditorium was full of mothers and sons. The boy entered in his wheelchair beside the maid. The curious stares did not stop him from proudly introducing her. "This is my mother of the heart." While the other mothers took photos, the millionaire, crouched among the guests, watched the scene in silence. For the first time, he saw that his fortune couldn't buy that. True love. He had followed them, a man of power and authority reduced to a quiet shadow in the back of the auditorium. "Mr.?" Thornton found a spot behind a group of parents, crouching slightly so as not to draw attention. He was out of place in his expensive suit, a figure from another world entirely. But he couldn't leave. He needed to see this. He needed to understand what had made his son so defiant, so brave, so happy. The answer unfolded before him in a tableau of simple, profound love. Finn was in his element. He pointed out his friends, his projects, and the banners he had helped hang. He was a different child here. His usual quiet, withdrawn demeanor was gone, replaced by a radiant confidence. His laugh, a sound Mr. Thornton had not heard in years, echoed happily in the auditorium. He spoke to Ilara with an ease and a trust that was utterly alien to his relationship with his own father. Ilara was a quiet presence beside him, her hand resting on the back of his wheelchair, a silent anchor in a chaotic room. She didn't speak much, but her eyes never left Finn. Mr. Thornton watched her from his hiding place, his cold gaze now something else entirely. It was a look of quiet, awe-filled observation. He saw the way she listened, the way her smile reached her eyes when Finn made a joke, the way she seemed to anticipate his needs before he even spoke them. All around them, a chorus of flashes went off. Mothers with their arms around their children, posing for photos, their faces glowing with a pride he had never experienced. He had provided for Finn in every conceivable way. The best doctors, the best physical therapists, the best tutors. He gave him every advantage, every luxury. He had bought Finn a life that was supposed to be easy, a life devoid of struggle. He had thought that was enough, but looking at Ilara and Finn, he felt the crushing weight of his miscalculation. He had given his son everything, but he had given him none of himself. And Ilara, with nothing but her time and her presence, had given Finn everything that mattered. She had given him her heart. The realization was a sharp, painful thing. He had worked his entire life to build a legacy, a dynasty, a fortune that would ensure his son's future. He believed that money was the ultimate tool, the solution to every problem, the key to every door. But here, in this loud, bright room, he saw a truth so simple and so profound, it took his breath away. The love that existed between Ilara and Finn was an unbought thing, a treasure more valuable than anything in his vault. He watched as Finn reached for Ilara's hand, and she instinctively took it, their fingers intertwining in a silent, powerful show of affection. He saw the boy's proud smile and the deep, abiding love in the maid's eyes. It was a love that was earned through every small, unseen act of care. It was a love that had bloomed in the silence he had left behind, and he, the wealthy millionaire, could only kneel on a cold auditorium floor, a silent, heartbroken witness to a connection he could never buy, never replicate, and never truly understand. While the other mothers took photos, the millionaire, crouched among the guests, watched the scene in silence. For the first time, he saw that his fortune couldn't buy that. True love. Chapter 8. The Family Picture. On the school wall, the boy had drawn a family, he in his wheelchair, his father in a suit, and the maid smiling next to them. The millionaire stared at that drawing for a long time. He moved away from the crowd, a man on the run from a truth he couldn't face. He needed to be alone. He walked the silent, empty corridors, the distant sounds of the Mother's Day party, a low, mocking hum. The walls were covered in a gallery of children's artwork, finger paintings, stick figures, and crooked hearts. Mr. Thornton, a man who dealt in the polished and perfect, found himself drawn to the raw, honest simplicity of it all. He scanned the displays, looking for a sign, a clue. He felt a desperate need to find something of his son's, a piece of his world that he could finally touch and understand. He found it near the end of the hallway, a small drawing taped to a bulletin board just below a banner that read, "Our mums are superheroes." The picture was done in thick, bright crayons. The lines were simple, the figures a child's interpretation of reality. His eyes immediately went to the central figure, a boy with messy brown hair and a bright grey shirt. The Isis boy was in a wheelchair, the wheels drawn with a few large circles. It was unmistakably Finn. Next to Finn, a tall figure stood. He was dressed in a blue suit, the colour so rich it looked almost black. His hair was neat, his face a simple line for a mouth. He was drawn with his hands in his pockets, a posture Mr. Thornton recognized as his own. He was the father. He was there, but he was separate, a silent figure at the edge of the drawing. Then his eyes landed on the third figure. She was a woman with short, curly hair and a wide, beaming smile. She wore a light blue uniform with an orange apron. Her hands were held out to the boy in the wheelchair, a gesture of open warmth. This was Ilara. Mr. Thornton's breath caught in his throat. He felt the cold shock of a truth he had never truly comprehended. He had always seen Ilara as an employee, a fixture in his home. He had seen her as a caretaker. But Finn had drawn her as family. He had placed her right in the middle, smiling, a source of light and life. He realized the profound sadness of the image. The millionaire who could buy anything was a distant, formal figure, a man in a suit standing with his hands in his pockets. The warmth, the love, the joy in the drawing all emanated from the woman he paid to be there. This was how his son saw him, as a distant provider, a part of the family, but not the heart of it. Mr. Thornton's gaze lingered on the drawing. He saw the happiness in the smiling crayon face of Ilara and the love in her outstretched arms. He saw the simplicity and the sincerity of it all. He saw a family, not defined by blood or by money, but by presence and connection. He had spent his life building a fortress of wealth to protect his son, but he had left the most important part of the castle empty. He had bought a life for his son, but he had failed to live it with him. He had given him a mansion, but he had not given him a home. This drawing, with its crooked lines and simple figures, was a testament to his failure and to Ilara's quiet, magnificent success. He stayed there for what felt like an eternity, the noises of the party fading into a distant murmur. He stared at the drawing until the details blurred, until all he could see was the truth it held. On the school wall, the boy had drawn a family, he in his wheelchair, his father in a suit, and the maid smiling next to them. The millionaire stared at that drawing for a long time. Back at the mansion, the boy couldn't stop repeating, "Today was the best day of my life." The maid tried to hold back tears, while the millionaire retreated to his office, shaken. The ride home was quiet, a stark contrast to the lively chaos of the school auditorium. Finn, however, was not quiet. He was a small, bubbling spring of uncontainable joy. He hummed the songs they had sung, he giggled at memories of his friends, and he kept turning his head to look at Ilara, his smile wider than ever. He was still wearing the small paper crown he had made, a lopsided, triumphant symbol of the day. As Ilara pushed his wheelchair up the long driveway, he began to speak, his voice a steady stream of happiness. "Did you see how Miss Gable said hi to you? And did you see how David wanted to see my card? He said it was the best one." He paused, looking up at her with a sincerity that made her heart ache. "Today was the best day of my life, Ilara. Thank you." His words, simple and direct, were a powerful force. They were not just a statement of joy, but a condemnation of every day that had come before. It was a truth that was hard to swallow, a testament to the lack in his life that she, Maid, had been able to fill, even if just for a few hours. A wave of emotion, hot and thick, rose in her throat. She bit her lip and focused on pushing the wheelchair forward, a quiet shield against the tears. Inside the mansion, the familiar silence greeted them, but it was a different kind of quiet now, one that held the lingering warmth of the day's events. Ilara helped Finn into his room, gently lifting him from his wheelchair onto his bed. "You're really tired, little man," she said softly, helping him take off his shoes. "But I'm not sleepy," he insisted, his voice still filled with energy. He pulled the blanket up to his chin. "I just keep thinking about it. And how you were there, it was the best." He said the words again, a mantra, a promise, a confirmation. "The best day of my life." Ilara sat beside his bed, holding his hand. She didn't know what to say. Words felt so inadequate. She just looked at him, at his happy, exhausted face, and the tears she had been fighting finally escaped, a single silent stream down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. She let it be. In a different part of the mansion, in the cold, opulent quiet of his private office, Mr. Thornton sat behind his massive mahogany desk. He had come home, but he had not truly returned. The house, once his refuge, now felt like a prison. He had a million things to do, a million calls to make, but he couldn't bring himself to do a single one. He was shaken. The memory of the drawing on the school wall was burned into his mind. He saw his own stiff, distant figure beside the smiling, warm one of Ilara. He saw his son's face and the love that was directed at her, not him. He had been so proud of his ability to provide, to build, to conquer. But today he had been humbled by a simple crayon, drawing and his son's happy face. He looked at the framed photos on his desk, pictures of buildings he owned, contracts he had signed, awards he had won. They were all meaningless now. They were proof of his success in the world and of his profound failure at home. The door to his office was closed, but he could still hear the faint echoes of his son's voice. He heard Finn's laughter, a sound as rare as a comet. He heard the muffled sound of happy chatter. He was physically present in the house, but he was more alone than ever. The silence of his office, once a symbol of his power, was now a tomb of his own making. Back at the mansion, the boy couldn't stop repeating, "Today was the best day of my life." The maid tried to hold back tears, while the millionaire retreated to his office, shaken. Later, the millionaire confessed to the maid, "I never knew how to give him what he really needed. You did in one day what I couldn't do in years." The mansion was quiet again, a deep, pervasive silence that fell when the long day finally ended. Finn was asleep, a small smile on his face, his paper crown resting on his bedside table. Ilara was in the kitchen, meticulously cleaning the countertops, her mind replaying the day's events. The sound of her scrubbing was the only thing that broke the stillness. She was so lost in her thoughts, she didn't hear him enter the room. "Ilara," she started. The sound of his voice in the quiet kitchen, as jarring as a shout. She turned to see Mr. Thornton standing in the doorway, his tie loosened, his suit jacket discarded. His posture was different. The rigid, confident line of his shoulders was gone, replaced by a subtle slump. His face was a map of exhaustion and confusion. "Sir," she said, her voice a low murmur. She straightened, instinctively returning to her professional deference. He didn't move. He just looked at her, and then his gaze fell to the countertop she was cleaning. "He's still talking about it," he said, his voice raw. "About how it was the best day of his life." Ilara nodded, her hands clasped in front of her. "Yes, sir. He was very happy. I saw you." The words were a quiet accusation, a statement of fact he couldn't hide from. "At the school. I saw the drawing, too." She didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He walked into the kitchen, a man out of place in a room that was not his. He sat down at the large marble table, the very same table where Finn had pushed his cereal around that morning. Mr. Thornton ran a hand over his face, a gesture of profound weariness. "He said, 'You're his mother of the heart,'" he said, and the words coming from him felt heavy and foreign. "What does that mean?" Ilara looked at him, truly looked at him for the first time. The cold, distant man she had known for years was gone. In his place was a tired, vulnerable man who had been stripped of his defenses. "It means he loves me, sir," she said, her voice gentle, "and that I love him. It's what it means." He leaned his elbows on the table, his head in his hands. "I have everything," he said, the words a bitter confession. "Every piece of technology, every asset, every security. I thought I was giving him everything he needed. And all he wanted was this." He looked up, a plea for understanding in his eyes. He finally spoke the truth, a simple, painful thing that had been unspoken for years. Later, the millionaire confessed to the maid, "I never knew how to give him what he really needed. You did in one day what I couldn't do in years." Over time, the boy started calling the maid for every important moment. She read him stories before bed, helped him with his studies, and laughed at his jokes. The wheelchair was never a barrier to the love that grew there. The silence that had once defined the mansion was now a thing of the past. It was still a quiet house, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with a new, gentle rhythm, a hum of companionship that came from two souls finally finding their place together. The events of Mother's Day were not a singular miracle, but the catalyst for a new way of living, a new way of loving. Every night, after his father had retreated to his office, Finn would call out from his room, "Ilara, can you come read to me?" She would put down her duster or her teacup and go to him. It was a ritual now. She would sit in the worn armchair by his bed, and he would lie there, his small body, relaxed and at peace, listening to her voice. She no longer read stories to simply pass the time. She read them with passion, her voice animated, her hands gesturing to bring the characters to life. The pages of the pirate book were now filled with a shared history, with inside jokes and whispered secrets. Ilara would finish a chapter, and they would talk for what felt like hours, not about the story, but about his dreams, his fears, his small triumphs. During the day, Finn's studies became their joint project. "Ilara," he'd call, and she'd come to his side, pulling a chair up to his desk. His homework, once a dull, solitary task, was now a collaborative effort. She would help him with his math problems, not by giving him the answers, but by patiently explaining the concepts. She was not a tutor, she was a partner. He would show her his science projects, his drawings, and his essays, not for her to clean or put away, but for her to admire and praise. The wheelchair was a piece of furniture, a way for him to move, never a barrier to the easy love that passed between them. She laughed more than she ever had in this house. Finn had a wit about him, a dry, clever humor that had been buried under years of loneliness. He would tell her a joke, a small, ridiculous thing he'd heard at school, and she would throw her head back and laugh, a clear, unrestrained sound that seemed to chase away the last of the mansion's ghosts. He would laugh with her, a happy, high-pitched giggle that made his shoulders shake. In those moments, they were just two people sharing a moment of pure joy, the titles of maid and boy, rich and poor, gone from the air. Mr. Thornton saw it all. He was still the millionaire, still the man who spent his days in his office, but his gaze was different now. He was an observer, a silent witness to a love he had failed to create, but was now powerless to stop. He saw Finn call for Ilara, saw the way she went to him without hesitation. He saw them hunched over a book, their heads close together. He saw them laugh. He saw a family, a true one, being built in the place where he had only ever built a fortune. Over time, the boy started calling the maid for every important moment. She read him stories before bed, helped him with his studies, and laughed at his jokes. The wheelchair was never a barrier to the love that grew there. One night, the millionaire found the two of them asleep on the sofa. The maid was hugging the boy, who was smiling even in his dreams. It was then that he understood. Family was not made of a last name or blood, but of presence, affection, and devotion. The mansion was wrapped in the deep quiet of the late night. Mr. Thornton, returning from yet another dinner he had barely paid attention to, walked through the silent foyer, his footsteps muffled by the thick carpet. The house was in darkness, save for the soft glow of a lamp in the living room. He wasn't sure why he was drawn to it. He was a man who usually went straight to his office. But tonight, something was different. He pushed the heavy door open and stopped, his breath catching in his throat. There, on the large sofa in front of the unlit fireplace, they were. Finn, his small body curled up, his legs draped over the armrest, was sleeping. And next to him, her head resting on a cushion, her arm wrapped around his small frame, was Ilara. She was still in her simple navy blue dress, the one she had worn to the school party. The lamp cast a soft golden light over them, painting the scene in a warmth that felt utterly foreign to this cold, empty house. Ilara's face was relaxed and peaceful in sleep, and she held the boy close, her touch gentle but secure. But it was Finn's face that truly stopped him. His son, who rarely smiled, was smiling now, even in the depths of his sleep. The curve of his lips was a testament to a peace and a joy that had nothing to do with wealth or power. It was a smile of contentment, a sign of a heart that felt safe and loved. Mr. Thornton stood for what felt like an eternity, a silent statue in the doorway. He was a man who had built an empire on logic and numbers, on assets and acquisitions. He had always believed that family was a fortress built of lineage, a name to be passed down, a legacy to be protected. He had given his son a gilded cage, a life of endless possibility bought with his own relentless labor. And here, in this one small moment, his entire philosophy was shattered. The scene before him held a truth so pure it was undeniable. This was not a photograph or a drawing on a wall. This was a lived, breathing reality. The love was a palpable thing, a tangible presence in the room. He saw the way Elara held his son, a fierce, protective love in her embrace. He saw the boy's smile, a clear reflection of that love. He had never seen his son sleep so peacefully. He had never seen him smile like that. Mr. Thornton finally understood. He had provided for his son. He had hired the best people to care for him, but he had not been present. He had been a provider, not a father. He had been a last name, but not a family. Elara, with nothing but her time and her heart, had given Finn everything he had lacked. She had shown up every day, every moment, with devotion and care. She had made a family out of two people who had no last name in common, no blood tie between them. The great mystery of what his son truly needed, the very question that had shaken him to his core, was answered not with words, but with a silent, sleeping image. The true currency of the world, he realized, was not money, but presence. The most valuable gift was not a thing, but a person. He felt the burning shame of his own absence, but it was mixed with a powerful, overwhelming sense of gratitude. A gratitude for this woman who had filled the void he had created, who had given his son a peace he himself could never buy. The house was now a home, not because of its walls of marble and glass, but because of the two souls who slept so peacefully within them. One night, the millionaire found the two of them asleep on the sofa. The maid was hugging the boy, who was smiling even in his dreams. It was then that he understood. Family was not made of a last name or blood, but of presence, affection, and devotion. For more stories that matter, join our community. Subscribe to Say Tales.